Well, this is a surprise. Sanabi hit me like a truck on fire, and I've been in love ever since. Tight controls, great initial mystery, and the succinct world building make it easily one of the best dad core games I've ever played. It was a good, self-contained story with an amazing send-off. And now, Yu Sung-hyung is back, giving us way more than expected. A new project only known as Paradise Workshop, a f***ing sequel to Sanabi, and today's topic, an expansion focused on Major Song. They've done it again, folks. Despite the prospect of more grappling hook action, I was a bit worried to hear there was more Sanabi content being released. All the important questions were already answered, and everything that didn't was left ambiguous for a reason. If handled poorly, you could make this game's Virgil retroactively worse due to over-explaining. It thankfully doesn't change her image too much, but recontextualizes and even reinforces her connection to the other characters. It's the best kind of side story. Make no mistake, this isn't nearly as long as the main game, nor is it as in-depth, but holy shit is there one hell of a revelation in store. So, second verse, same as the first. If you have any interest in the free DLC, or even just Sanabi in general, play it first, then come back here, because this whole video is going to be one big spoiler. So without further ado, let's start A Haunted Day. We begin 13 years before the events of Sanabi. Of the 16 public divisions working under the royal court, Major Isun Song, regrettably, works under division number 12. With its nebbish chief and his stupid hat, the chief is more content to sweep things under the rug, to not jeopardize an upcoming promotion, even at the cost of human life. Compounding his dripless behavior, while investigating potential leads about someone using advanced AI, the chief convinces Major Song to commence Operation 3. While details are kept vague, if Major Song goes through with this, then she'll take full responsibility, and potentially all the consequences. What a guy. We reach the site, a junkyard, and our suspicions are all but confirmed. There's old combat turrets that are somehow still active and immediately hostile, the signs of AI tampering. There are also hints of someone else who came before us, like an animal with metal claws tore through this place. But just like Major Song says, don't think about it. We aren't here to speculate because we have a job to do. So just like that, we assume full command and begin our mission. By comparison, A Haunted Day's presentation is easily its weakest aspect. It's nothing to do with the animations or sprite work, it's everything to do with the location. The scrapyard runs wide and deep, and sometimes it's red. I'm not saying I need a variety of areas, frankly it would be goofy if there was a whole business district down here, but I'm just saying visually, we don't get anything like the factory this time around. This place houses old war era machinery, it was built practically and seems pretty neglected. But just like the main game, the enemies visually aren't too complicated. They're antiquated and obsolete robots that were used in a previous conflict, with the irony being, they might be more varied. We got ground turrets, drone turrets, flak cannons, and the I really liked how the engineers of the past just took blocks of iron and slapped on some heavy ordnance, and the bullets definitely reflect that, because look at these things. Huge, slow, and ripe for the picking. More on that later. They serve as a nice contrast to the sleek and modern machines that fight the Brigadier General. You can even see a through line from these blocky turrets to the ones used in Magolcor's security force. And despite my criticism of the lackluster backgrounds, the drabness of the area helps highlight the danger. You'll never lose track of where the enemy is or how many molten fridges are speeding towards you, and the areas for the cutscenes are still gorgeous. Even when they're in the factory, they do so much to build the atmosphere or set the tone for what's coming up. The rolling lights inside the factory nests, the afternoon sun shining on the overpass as Major Song heads to the operations zone and rides what is clearly Kaneda's bike. There's little in the way of anything charming, however. There's no Mari this time around. And the sidekick we do get, they exist, and are more of a way to pick Major Song's brain as we go through the story, serving as more of a guide for the audience rather than an actual character. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There is one aspect that, while I wouldn't say it's a direct improvement over the base game, appeals to me way more than that chain arm ever could. Let's talk about gameplay. If you remember in the base game, Major Song did well enough on the training grounds to keep pace with the Brigadier General. And keep in mind, Major Song doesn't have a chain arm. Instead, she has a superheated rope spear that can cut through reinforced bunker doors like warm butter, and an absolute bunker buster of a shotgun, which when you hit enemies enough times, gets amped and gains piercing shots to deal with crowds. This is just the weaponry that we're aware of. If the cops are wielding the prosthetics of pain, I hate to be on the business end of anything that the other big hats had. But back on topic, the basic melee is good for what it is. You can combo with it on the ground, and in the air, you get Cloud's Nair. from Smash 4. Because it covers you in a 360, it's good for anti-airing weaker enemies, or to cover your landing to start a string of hits. Most enemies suffer hit stun when you land attacks, so despite the decrease in maneuverability, you can still be pretty aggressive. Having a melee and a ranged option should already tell you what kind of game this is compared to the original. For example, let's take a look at their fighting styles when fighting the Writ of Execution. The General performs a multi-stage plan with the help of Mari, and narrowly defeats the worm with good timing and more than enough luck. And here's Major Song. While the Brigadier General uses his chain arm to outmaneuver his enemies and strike with lethal precision, Major Song hits you with a steel chair before setting you on fire. But despite the staggering difference in their arsenal, the whole momentum-based platforming is still maintained to a degree. There's a double jump to clear gaps, a shotgun with a slight drift if you hold down the button, and the shotgun itself, with the amped shot, can even send you further. So far, A Haunted Day is going more the way of a traditional 2D platformer, but this is the cherry on top. Flying enemies in most games are a nuisance, the worst enemy, kinda shit. But in Sanabi, you see them less as an obstacle and more as opportunities. Normally, your amped shotgun is only available after hitting enemies several times, which means constantly hovering around enemies and using air combos. Viable, but restrictive and repetitive. That's where the deflect comes in. Despite the large circle it covers, you want to have enemy projectiles land near the edge of the ring. There are two reasons for this. 1. It can't be spammed and there's a considerable dead zone inside the circle if your timing is off. 2. If you press deflect while the projectile is at the edge of the ring, you get an amped shot for free. Some fun ideas, but nothing too crazy. Well, that's because I didn't mention Major Song's secret weapon and signature ability, the very thing that puts her on par with the Brigadier General. When perfectly deflecting at least 3 projectiles at once, she gets an install. Every offensive option gets amped, hits become multi-hits, your horizontal movement increases dramatically, and because you just perfectly parried, you get an amped shot for free. Even the deflect becomes an actual attack that covers a wide AoE. Remember when I discussed opportunities? Keep certain enemies alive to replenish your amped shots, and use a combination of rejumps and shotgun blasts to stay airborne indefinitely. Never touch the ground again. Defeat all the essential enemies in one area, but leave the extra enemies alive. Because they don't despawn and their aggro range is effectively infinite, have one singular bullet drag behind you until you need an amped shot, and once you recognize which enemies shoot multiple pellets in a beautiful uniform spread, you know it's time to pull that trigger, that beautiful devil trigger. You wanna know why I didn't dedicate the sound to its own section? It's because I'd just be glazing the shotgun. The musical highlights and best sounds are tied to the combat. The sounds are based up to make everything feel heavy. Even the most basic projectiles are the size of Major Song. That's a bullet that could kill 50 Cent. But back to the music. Invader 303 returns for the soundtrack. Due to the nature of things, I'd say the tracks are a bit more one note this time around, but since the DLC is 90% combat, we're firmly in Carpenter Brut territory, which is appropriate. Everything related to sound and music fills me with joy, and I wouldn't change a thing. I called Sanabi character action adjacent before, but A Haunted Day is straight up a spectacle shooter with elements of Devil May Cry. Double jump gets restored when hitting airborne enemies, that's enemy step, ending or even extending airtime with an amped firearm, that's gunslinger. This is what I meant by momentum. There's the literal momentum in how Major Song bounces from robot to reach the end of the level, but there's also that high you get from pulling off some absolutely stylish stuff here. That was the main reason Yu Sung-hyung went with making Major Song the main character this time around. Everything is fresh and exciting, different from the main game in a good way, that honestly kind of makes me want them to go back and have Major Song playable in the main campaign, in some non-canon alternate scenario that probably won't be that fun, but hey, I can dream. It goes without saying that, yeah, Major Song rules. And while character action can be a bit off-putting to people, like they assume everything associated with the genre involves StarCraft level APM and not showering, I can safely say that while there's a barrier to entry, if you're used to the high-flying, web-swinging adventure that was Sanabi's main campaign, this game isn't too hard. So let's finally get to the point. What's actually happening here? There's very little story to actually parse through this time around, but if you don't want to get spoiled, then go to here. Physically, normal men can't muster a force large enough to oppose the royal court. Even if we can put a number to their fighting force, we still don't know what the royal court is truly capable of. The only thing that could potentially challenge His Majesty is artificial intelligence, something like personality data to copy and reproduce highly trained soldiers on a large scale. As long as there is evidence of advanced AI, the royal court will respond with a generational purge of everyone involved. All we need now is proof, but we have something more concerning. There are no AI cores within the factory's robots. Remote hacking from advanced AI is possible, but if you've ever used TeamViewer, there still needs to be a brain to control. They're being puppeted, but by what? Maybe we should ask him. The laws against AI are mandated by His Royal Majesty and enforced by the 16 divisions of the Royal Court. But when threats to your regime could spring up anywhere, maybe 16 isn't enough. While specifics aren't told, all divisions under the Royal Court act as civil servants. But then there's Division 17. If Division 12 are SWAT officers, then 17 is the first encounter assault recon, because they hunt ghosts. Well, they investigate supernatural phenomenon. Still, holy shit. The Brigadier General is a government-funded Winchester. How common is this supernatural in Cyberpunk Korea? There was no indication that this was even on the table. If you're familiar with Korean mythology, then you'll probably see where this is going. But still, it's cool to see that Sanabi is willing to introduce mythological creatures, but interpret them differently to fit with the setting. Today's cryptid is dubbed the BULGASARI, something that acts like an advanced AI with the ability to manipulate complex machines remotely. Its origin and goals are unclear, but we can trace this thing to a potential real-world counterpart, the BULGASARI, translating to something impossible to kill. It's a quadrupedal chimera with the body of a bear, the trunk of an elephant, eyes of a rhino, claws of a tiger, and tail of a bull. According to this wiki article, the BULGASARI was created by a Buddhist monk, being persecuted during the Goryeo era of Korea because Buddhism was out and Neo-Confucianism was in. The BULGASARI started its life as a small figure made of rice grain, but started to bloom when it consumed metal, starting with small needles, then farming tools, and eventually the weapons of the military, serving as the anti-Lockheed Martin. We can see parallels here. Not only does the Brigadier General have a hard time dealing with this thing because of his metal arm, he's concerned with the BULGASARI potentially spreading. In the myth, it was made from rice grains, seeds. And you know who cares about none of this? You guessed it. Major Song isn't a complicated character. She's a hothead with a strong sense of justice, and she doesn't like to overcomplicate things. Supernatural Oscar the Grouch is making trash singularities? We don't need to know where it came from, only that it has to go. She uses this to anchor not only those under her command, but mainly herself in the moment, because, to her, overthinking and potential inaction in the face of something serious is what could turn this entire city into a crater. This is her strongest trait and her biggest weakness. In her eyes, it's all about getting to the end. So what chance does Major Song have? Well, BULGASARI can be translated to another way, a Chinese way, something that can be killed by fire. and that's how Major Song joined Division 17. From the one interview I could find, Wonder Potion wanted to essentially make a Haunted Day the setup for Sanabi 2. As such, making Major Song the lead was the right decision. A Haunted Day opens the door to more possibilities within the setting, while not making it laughably silly or over-expanding on what we already know. The story this time is super bare bones, there are some narrative parallels to itself, and even though we're retreading plot points a little bit, let's just say I'm glad we're not dealing with another secret child. Wait, hold on. I highly recommend it. They even have a Discord if you want to stay updated on what they're cooking. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all the suggestions coming in, so you know I got stuff in the pipeline. Take care of yourselves, and see you next time.